Task Force. Today's webinar is part of our ongoing webinar series focused on topics of concern regarding Communist Chinese pandemic response policies, including mandates for vaccines and centralized compliance tracking, digital technologies, which are, we believe, a gateway to tyrannical social credit scores, surveillance, and mass population control. A video of this webinar will post to stopvaxpassports.org within a day of the conclusion of our program. Calls to action and past webinars can be found there too. Please share these with your elected officials, friends, colleagues, and other networks. Our co-host today and moderator is Frank Gaffney. He is the chairman for the Center for Security Policy, co-chair of the Stop Vax Passports Task Force, and co-founder of the Sovereignty Coalition. Also, vice chair of the Committee on the Present Danger China.
Thank you, Didi. Welcome, everyone, to another in this extraordinary series of webinars brought to you by the Stop Vax or Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force. It is a distinct privilege to be associated with these programs because I think they are some of the most extraordinary resources that certainly I'm familiar with in terms of insights into challenges that most of us, alas, are unaware are in the works, or in some cases actually now besetting our country. It is particularly true of two of the phenomena that we will be talking about in the course of this edition of this webinar series. Digital IDs, they come in a variety of names, health passports, the digital medical cards, smart cards, and so on. But at the end of the day, they're basically a vehicle, a platform, if you will, for putting an abundance of information, including some extraordinarily sensitive personal information, in a place that it can be accessed by government agencies, supranational ones, and who knows who all else. That's one side of the coin. The flip side is something called the central bank digital currencies. Both of these are being brought forward, as we'll talk about with this distinguished panel, by the government of the United States and by foreign entities, both governmental and supranational and private sector, to one purpose: control of populations, including ours. This sounds very conspiratorial, or certainly very ominous, and doubtless will be met with incredulity by some. But I think you will find by the end of this program that the information that is provided, the used to help flesh out that information and make it accessible to both those watching at the moment and those that will in the future, will be convincing that we are facing truly dystopian efforts to destroy the sovereign United States, the Constitution thereof, and the personal and national sovereignty that reside in those important entities. To kick things off, I'm always proud to be able to introduce our co-chairman of the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force, a woman whose roles are prodigious at the moment, including as president as well as founder of a wonderful organization, Women's Rights Without Frontiers. She is a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China and a force of her name is Reggie Littlejohn. She's an attorney by training, with a degree from Yale Law School. She has been a litigator and is now bringing all of these skills to bear on behalf of, the common weal, the public interest, and particularly the sovereignty and security of the United States of America and its people. Richard Littlejohn, welcome, and thank you for your leadership in putting together this very, very timely and very important program.
Thank you so very much, Frank. So humanity has never been closer than we are now to losing our freedom worldwide. And once these digital IDs combined with digital currencies are set in place together, there will be no more dissent, because as soon as you try to dissent, they can cut you off from your credit cards, from your bank accounts. And opening it this way seems kind of alarmist. So what I'm going to do is walk you through it, 30,000-foot view, and let the global elite talk to you in their own words. I have 3 videos where you're going to hear them themselves telling you what they're going to do. The first one I want to start with is, his name is Budi Satkin, the health minister of Indonesia. This is a speech he made in November of 2022 at the B20 summit in Indonesia. So the B20 summit is a subset of the G20. The G20 is the 20 biggest GDP governments in the world. They get together. They're not elected, but they have tremendous influence. Why? Because people listen to them. So, for example, the Biden administration put the G20 declaration on the White House website. So that's why they have powers, because we give them power. And anyway, so this gentleman, Budi Satkin, is the health minister of Indonesia. The B20 was in Indonesia in 2022. And I would just like you to listen to what he said about vaccine passports and the intention of the B20 to implement these.
Digital health certificate acknowledged by WHO, if you have been vaccinated or tested properly, then you can move around. So for the next pandemic, instead of stopping the movement of the people 100%, which clogged the economy globally, you can still provide some movement of the people. Indonesia has achieved, G20 country has agreed to have this digital certificate using WHO standard, and we will submit into the next World Health Assembly in Geneva as the revision to international health regulation. So hopefully for the next pandemic, we can still see some movement of the people, some movement of the goods, and movement of the economy.
What he was talking about was the next pandemic. Why are they so sure that there's going to be a next pandemic? I mean, the last pandemic was the Spanish flu. It was 100 years ago. So this is something that they've been talking about, that Gates has been talking about, that Fauci's been talking about. But in any case, they want to have that if you've been vaccinated or tested properly, then you can move around for the next pandemic, meaning that if you have not been vaccinated or tested properly, you will not be able to move around. In connection with this, we have the Biden administration's creating a new office, permanent Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response Policy. Why? He's already declared the COVID pandemic to be over, and pandemics are only supposed to come about once every 100 years. So why do we need a permanent Office of Preparedness and Response unless there is another pandemic right around the corner? Maybe, do they know something that we don't know? So how far have we gotten in establishing this vaccine passport or global health ID? People have been relaxing. People feel it's summer, that the pandemic has been declared over, but actually they have been moving forward with this. So I'd like now I would like to play the video by Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, who will say where they are at right now with these vaccine passports.
While the emergency phase of the COVID-19 pandemic is now over, investments in digital infrastructure remain an important resource for health systems and for economies and societies at large. Like many countries, the European Union made significant investments in COVID-19 certificates to help people move around as safely as possible during the pandemic. The European Union's certification system was used by all 27 EU member states and more than 50 other countries. Building on the success of the EU system, WHO is proud today to launch the Global Digital Health Certification Network. So thank you so much to European Union for the excellent certification system that you have transferred to us, and we have the chance to build on it. WHO will begin operations of the network today with the existing COVID-19 certificate as a global public good. Soon after, we will expand this infrastructure by incorporating other use, such as a digitized international certificate of vaccination, routine immunization cards, and international patient summaries.
So, Dr. Tedros has just told us that he is proud to launch the Global Digital Health Certification Network. So this is happening globally. While people are out enjoying the summer, enjoying the fact that we're not under lockdown right now, they have been moving forward to launch this global digital ID. And it's not just going to be about your health status or your vaccination status. Here I have a chart from the World Economic Forum. This is an image that was gotten off of the World Economic Forum website. And it's all the different aspects of our digital identity. So I'm going to read through a few of them that you're going to need a digital ID card to access. This is how they're going to enforce this. We're not going to have access to any of these things if we don't have this digital ID card. So one is healthcare, for users to access insurance and treatment. One is telecommunications, for users to own and use devices. So you're not going to be able to own a cell phone or any kind of telecommunications device unless you have a digital ID. For service providers to monitor these devices and data on the network. For e-government, okay, for citizens to access and use services, file taxes, vote, and collect benefits. So you're not going to be able to file your taxes or vote if you don't have a digital ID, according to the World Economic Forum. That's what they want. For social interactions, in other words, if you want to use email, you want to use social media, you're going to have that digital ID. For e-commerce, to shop, you'll have to have a digital ID. For humanitarian response, to access services. So in other words, if there's a tornado or a tsunami somewhere and people are dying and hurting, and we have some kind of humanitarian response, well, they better have a digital ID or they're not going to be able to access services. For travel and mobility, to book trips. For financial services, to open bank accounts, to carry out online financial transactions. So you will not be able to have a bank account or carry on an online financial transaction unless you have a digital ID. That's their goal, and they are marching straight down towards it. So will this be implemented in the United States? And well, there's a bill right now in front of the Senate by Senator Sinema. She introduced a bill which is called Improving Digital Identity Act of 2023. Improving Digital Identity Act of 2023. I understand it's currently in committee, but what it says that this is to combat fraud, like identity fraud, but it will serve as the platform for this universal digital ID that is being pushed by the World Economic Forum and by the World Health Organization and others. So how will they accomplish this? Well, they've told us, okay, and it's through central bank digital currencies. The global digital ID, as I just said, is going to be tied to your ability to buy and sell, to bank. And in a rare moment of candor, Augustine Carstens, who's the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements, gave money at the International Monetary Fund. And I would like to play that speech right now. This is the head of the Bank of International Settlements telling us what these central bank digital currencies are going to do.
tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
This is a very sensational statement, and it's like a removing of the veil of what they're all about. They want to establish central bank digital currencies because if you pay cash for something, nobody knows anything about it. You have privacy, and if you use a central bank digital currency, the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank bank liability. That's just another way for saying money. So they'll have determine the use of that money, and they have the technology to enforce that. So what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. They just came out on June 23, so very recently, the Bank of International Settlements released their, quote, game-changing blueprint for the future monetary and financial system. So this is their blueprint for how basically they're going to take over the world. And it will be, quote, tokenized money and assets on a programmable platform. Well, what is tokenized money and assets? What they want to do, what they plan to do, what they're in the process of doing is turning everything in the real world into tokens on something that they call the unified ledger. Okay. So the unified ledger is keeping track of all the money and all the assets that are non-monetary in the world, so that you can have instantaneous transactions between you and anyone else in the world. That's how they're going to sell it. Oh, you don't. There's no more hassle with all these transactions and everything. All right, but what it does is it tokenizes everything. So the money in your bank account will be worth a certain amount of tokens. But not only that, your car will be tokenized. Your house will be tokenized. Anything that you own that they can find is going to be tokenized. And they will have the rules, like for money, they will have rules about when you can spend it, how you can spend it, if you can spend it. So a rule might be, oh, we're having a climate issue, so no one can drive more than 5 miles from their home. And so then your money will not work 5 miles from your home. Or we need everybody to get vaccinated. And so all of a sudden, because you're not vaccinated, you can't use your money at all. I mean, that's just that. Those are just, and there's much more to it than that. We need to have like just on this. And who sets the rules? People who set the rules are the global elites. And the central bank digital currencies are going to be rolled out worldwide. The Biden administration just in the last month has rolled out Fed Now, which is like a precursor to this. It kind of normalizes everybody expecting to go through the Federal Reserve when making transactions. And how will all of this be used to trap us? Well, I'd like to show you a short video about cities. And this video is it's an interview of Christine Anderson by Yanya Kellick of American Thought Leaders. It's just a snippet.
A 15-minute city mean basically a neighborhood where you can reach everything you need within a 15-minute foot walk, a doctor, grocery store, and so forth. However, if you now fancy another store and it does not happen to be in your neighborhood, you won't be going to that store anymore. Total control is what we're talking about. Once they decide you're no longer allowed to leave your 15-minute immediate area, they don't have to fence it in or anything. It will be done via digital ID.
With a social credit system, kind of
something
maintaining
like that.
Compliance.
Yes. And there's pilot project already going on in Bologna. It's called the Bologna Wallet. And in Vienna, it's called the Vienna Token. It's voluntary for now. And it's only pretty much enticing people to get some tickets for a little less or something like that to go to theater, something like that. But soon there will be a time you don't have a choice anymore. You have to have this digital green certificate, this QR code, whatever.
You get to see the whole video, but you certainly get the idea, which is that through these digital IDs, through facial recognition, through having surveillance cameras on all the corners, they're going to be able to see exactly what you're doing. They're going to be able to enforce this 15-minute city. And if you want to leave, let's say that you actually said something against the government or whatever, you're not going to be able to leave. You're not going to be able to escape. You are going to be trapped. So, I mean, if this doesn't scare the heck out of you, I mean, I think it should, because they're rolling these things out all over the world already. So we are on the cusp of a complete totalitarian takeover. And if we are able to wake up enough people fast enough to resist, maybe we can escape. But if we're not able to wake up enough people fast enough, we will not escape. And then our national sovereignty and our personal medical freedom will be destroyed, and possibly all of Western civilization. So please commit yourself right now to taking action while you can. And there will be a number of ways of taking action. You can go onto the Sovereignty Coalition website and sign the Sovereignty Declaration. You can go on Stop Vax Passport's website and sign any number of actions that will alert your congressional representatives that you do not want CBDCs, you do not want vaccine passports, and that you want us to defund and withdraw from the WHO. But don't think that you're going to do this next year like, oh, I know I should do something, maybe I'll do it later, because there will not be a later. If we don't act now, we're not going to be able to. Thank you.
And thank you, Reggie, as always, for a brilliant introduction to a multifaceted topic, that different dimensions that we will be exploring with our subsequent panelists and in the Q&A. And I so appreciate, again, you're putting together this really terrific treatment of this emerging and quite ominous threat, indeed. We're going to hear next from a man who has written a book on the subject. His name is Nick Corbishley. He is a journalist by profession and the author of Scanned: Why Vaccine Passports and Digital IDs Will Mean the End of Privacy and Personal Freedom. We've asked Nick to walk us through how these digital IDs that Reggie's introduced are a necessary component and building block for central bank digital currencies and what they portend. Nick, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time to join us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for your very kind introduction, Frank, and for inviting me onto this panel. So I wrote this book, Scanned, which came out roughly a year and a half ago, when we were kind of like coming out of, to a certain extent, the vaccine passport era. And I put that in inverted commas because, as Reggie said, that era is not really over, since the World Health Organization has decided to adopt the European Union's vaccine passport system, the so-called Green Pass, as a kind of global standard. I mean, since writing that book, I am both pleased as a journalist and dismayed as a citizen of the European Union, as a resident of Spain, a citizen of the European Union, and a citizen of the world, to see that a lot of the warnings I made in that book have come to pass. We are, I think, getting closer and closer to a point of no return. And the reason why it will be a point of no return is that once these digital systems of control and surveillance are live, once they are basically on our phones and no longer optional, but mandatory, which I believe eventually will occur, actually escaping from that system will be all but impossible. It will be, I think, a system of totalitarian control, the likes of which even the worst tyrannies of the 20th century could only have dreamt of. And we are maybe only months, probably more like a few years away from that occurring. So I want to give a broad picture of where we are in the liberal, so-called liberal West. And it's not going to be very liberal for much longer. We are In Canada, in Australia, they are pushing quite hard with digital identity, and leading the way, interestingly, are the largest commercial banks. Australia is probably further along than any Western liberal country to actually creating a central bank digital currency. It's already in the pilot stage. And it's really the only country, important, I would say, country of import within the so-called West that is at that stage. Canada is on a similar path. The European Union it's first set itself the target of September this year to be launching the digital identity, the EID, in Europe, at least so that each member government can make available to its citizens the EID. Again, it would be a purely optional system to begin with, and we don't know how long that will last, but they have had to put that back. The deadline for that is now looking like it's going to be in 2024. But they are again quite close to completion. They are at the pilot stage phase. They have 4 pilot programs currently under development in the EU. And as Reggie said, I would like to give a list of the things that the applications that they're exploring right now in those programs. They include accessing government services, including taxes and all these other things, opening a bank account, registering your SIM card, mobile driving license, signing contracts, and I suppose that could mean contracts of any kind, claiming prescriptions, and one would assume many other healthcare applications, including presumably vaccines, traveling and mobility, organizational digital identities. So, this is a very important point that we have the digital identity. The ID is not only for individuals, it's for organizations, it's for companies, it's for institutions, education certification, and accessing social security benefits. And one may assume the universal basic income that quite possibly will be coming at some point, which will essentially be the likely carrot for any central bank digital currency. The last application is payments. I leave that to last because of just how big a topic that is. One would assume that they are referring in the mid to long term to central bank digital currencies. And it is fundamental that people realize that digital identity, in my book, I say that vaccine passports are a precursor to much broader digital identity programs. Now we're seeing that come into action, and for digital identity, digital identity are fundamentally important for central bank digital currencies. Without them, it would be all but impossible to put into effect central bank digital currencies. And these are not my words, these are the words of a Financial Times article from 2021, which said, I quote, "What central bank digital currency research and experimentation appears to be showing is that it will be nigh on impossible to issue such currencies outside of a comprehensive national digital ID management system." So without digital ID, we do not have central bank digital currencies. So one way of stopping central bank digital currencies is to stop digital identities. The problem with that is that most people are not really even aware that either central bank digital currencies or digital identity are actually in the pipeline. And this was made clear to us in a recent Cato Institute poll in the United States, which the headline of this poll was that only 16% of the US population is in favor of a digital dollar. But the more interesting data point for me was the fact that only 72%, a staggering 72% of the people questioned had actually heard of what a central bank digital currency was. And that is not a bug. It is a feature of the way these digital surveillance and control systems are being rolled out. The only way, and we're seeing this in so many other types of consultations that take place, most people are in a huge majority opposed to these digital systems, whether it's digital identity, whether it's central bank digital currencies. But the fact that this is not a topic of conversation around the dinner table, the fact that people are not talking about this is essentially, it puts us in a position of total weakness, total vulnerability. The only way we can stop this shift, this gradual shift towards this digital control system is if there is a debate about it, if there is a discussion about this. And the only way that happens is if we get enough people talking about this in the media, and not just the alternative media, but in the media in general. And what gives me a slither of hope is what has happened the last 3 weeks in my native UK, where Nigel Farage has had his bank account of many years closed by a very, very old bank in the UK for his political beliefs, for his social acquaintances. And this is something that was rigorously denied by the bank itself. And the bank even invented a lie suggesting that the reason why they closed the account was that Nigel Farage did not have enough money to warrant an account. And that was proven to be a lie because Nigel Farage himself was able to, had sources on the inside of the bank who provided him with documentation showing that it was purely political. So we've seen a similar thing in the United States the last couple of days with Dr. Mercola, somebody who is very active in the alternative health sphere. And he says that family members of his and associates of his, business associates of his, have had their accounts closed. So this is something that we are seeing more and more of. In the UK, it has prompted a significant debate in the public arena. So finally, people are beginning to realize, well, this is actually not just possible, it's beginning to happen. And if we live in a central bank digital currency, the weaponization of this kind of political control will be significantly greater.
Nick Corvishless, thank you. What a splendid drill down on the nature of the problem and the extent to which our inattention to it is a yawning vulnerability. Might I just add that one other piece of this, and we'll get into it more along the line here, but that ought to be concentrating our minds is, as I think Reggie touched on a little bit, this is actually in practice with respect to 1.4 billion people or thereabouts in communist China. The digital platforms have now been morphed into a super control mechanism called the social credit system in combination with the control of the bank accounts and as it's, I guess, rolling out there too now, a digital currency controlled by, of course, the Chinese Communist. Whether it's some sort of anecdotal evidence from prominent figures like Dr. McCullough and Nigel Farage, or doubtless others that we will be learning more about in the days to come, it's already in place on an epic scale in the largest population nation in the world. And again, I think Reggie did mention this, that the social credit score, which operates, is now, as I think you put it, a feature of all of this, not a bug, a feature of it. And we're going to be seeing more of that in due course here as well, part and parcel of this control mechanism. Which brings us to our next presenter, a man who is renowned, I think, now as one of our country's preeminent experts on economic warfare. He has been studying these sorts of developments now for decades. He reports on them very impressively at a television show, which he's the host. It's called Economic War Room with Kevin Freeman on the Blaze TV and other platforms. He is, however, not just an extraordinarily thoughtful and visionary analyst of the sorts of challenges we've been discussing. He is also an ingenious and very creative intellect when it comes to thinking about what do we do about such challenges. He has a new book coming out titled Pirate Money, which talks about a constitutional mechanism that the founders gave states to create gold and silver-backed currencies that can be a, antidote to this central bank digital currency. Kevin has been working in his native state of Texas to get this adopted. He'll tell us more about it in a pre-recorded video that he has generously done for us, as well as describe interest that's being expressed now in other states. And it's high time that we have that interest expressed, and hopefully with the help of those on this program and our audiences that we will generate the kind of public interest awareness and engagement that Nick has called for on behalf of Pirate Money and other steps that are in order here. We'll go to Kevin Freeman now for his introduction of not just the problem from his perspective, but the solution as well.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Reggie, to be part of this webinar. What I'm going to be sharing about is disrupting central bank digital currency with the money used by pirates. I know that may sound a little bit odd, but we're facing a serious threat. FedNow, the operating system, launched last week. And FedNow is the software that CBDC will run on. FedNow is the operating system, and they've already denied that they have anything to do with central bank digital currency because they don't want the political backlash. But without it, CBDC could not operate. And we know they're moving forward. President Biden wrote an executive order that mandated that the government, the whole of the government, including the Federal Reserve, look at what they called programmable money. And it talks about in the executive order for the purpose of climate change and health and equity and so forth. So it's going to be programmed by the government with political objectives. And to do that, they're going to have to remove any alternatives that they can. For example, they've already attacked cryptocurrency. There's already a big attack on Bitcoin. In fact, the SEC took Ripple to court. They lost very recently in that court order, but the court order also said that, yes, of course, the SEC can regulate Ripple. They just need to be clear in how they're doing it. And of course, the Congress can shut it down. We know there's another threat, the gold-backed currency that the BRICS nation are bringing forward and the Chinese gold wallet. It's been said that the BRICS nation currency will be made available at their next meeting, August 22nd. I'm not certain that that's true, but it is a very serious threat that's out there. So how do we resolve this? How do we address it? If we know the federal government can go after any alternatives to our use of money, they can outlaw it. At one point, FDR even all the gold back in the 30s. So what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? I have good news, and that is in the Constitution, the founders of this nation in 1787 wrote a hidden secret, and it is found in Article 1, Section 10. I'll read you that article, and then I'll explain how that works for us. They said, no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, which would be paper money, or make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. Then it goes on and says pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, and so forth. But the founders were very specific, and they said gold and silver coin could be a tender in payment of debts. And what they were talking about was a Spanish milled dollar. That's where we get the term dollar. Dollar wasn't invented in the United States. It wasn't invented in colonial America. It was the term that was applied to a piece of eight produced by Spain. You know, piece of eight, pirate money. They would chop it up into 8 pieces. Each was worth 12.5 cents. Those were called a bit. 2 bits made a quarter. 4 quarters made a dollar. That's pirate money. And gold doubloons, gold and silver coin, pieces of 8 and gold doubloons. That's put in the Constitution that a state can make that legal tender. Now, what that means is we can propose a solution. I call it the silver and gold bullet to kill the Great Reset and CBDC using existing infrastructure based on proven technology, using state-based laws so the federal government can't interfere. It's in the Constitution, and it's not fractional banking. It's 100% transacting in gold and silver. Now, obviously, people can't carry around bags of gold and silver coins with them. Can you imagine going to a coffee shop and pulling out a gold doubloon that was worth thousands of dollars and trying to shave off a few flecks of gold to pay for your coffee? It wouldn't be practical. But if you combine something we've already done in Texas, which is a state-based Texas Bullion Depository, you can learn about it at texasbulliondepository.gov, with modern technology, you can have a monetary system that will rival what the Federal Reserve has produced. Now, when I say Texas Bullion Depository, it's just a gold vault that we've produced that you can put your gold there, and Texas will guard it, keep it, and keep track of it for you. And you pay a small fee for doing that. But can you imagine if we could add that to modern technology and use it like Bitcoin technology or just your banking, a debit card technology? Now, is this constitutional? And the answer is yes. In 1836, Briscoe versus Bank of Kentucky, I think it was 1837, was a Supreme Court case where they ruled that actually you can deposit gold or silver at a bank in a state, and then they can issue you receipts, warehouse receipts, that can trade as currency, and it is totally able to be decision. It was 1837, and it absolutely gave us the right. So they could produce warehouse receipts from the bullion depository, and we could trade those like currency. The problem is people don't use paper anymore. How often do you pay for something with bills out of your wallet? You tap to pay, or you pay for it with a debit or a credit card. So we need to add some modern technology to it. And the other problem is the court ruled gold and silver coins. Fortunately, in 1868, the court said that gold and silver coins are the equivalent of gold and silver bullion. They found that gold bullion, actual metal, is equivalent to gold coins. One is weighed, they said, and the other is counted. Coins are counted and bullion is weighed. But the effect is the same because the value of the coin is the metal within it, which means we can take the Briscoe decision with the Bronson decision and deposit in a state bank like the Bullion Depository, and they can issue receipts for it, and it doesn't have to be coins that you put in there. You don't have to use gold doubloons and pieces of eight. Now, add that to the modern technology of Glint Pay, which is a debit card that you can just attach to a gold vault. We're working to bring this to Texas, and it can work in any state. Now, the problem is Glint Pay offers no privacy protection. It's taxable as a collectible. All transactions are reportable to the IRS, and it's stored in Switzerland. But what if we made it legal tender in a U.S. state? Then none of those problems would apply, and you can literally deposit your gold and pay 1/1000th of a fraction of an ounce of gold and buy your coffee cup. And that is the beauty of this system. We brought this forward in Texas. We almost got it passed in the last legislative session. We're working on a special session where we can get it passed. And this is economic justice. The focus is accessible, convenient, safe, affordable, and equitable. It's like adding an ATM machine to a bank. You're adding an ATM machine to a gold vault. And the beauty of it is they keep track of it. You don't have to store it. You don't have to calculate, but they guarantee your gold is kept as your gold. It's a service for everyday Americans. We launched this, put an Align Act campaign together. You can find it at transactionalgold.com, and we attracted 2.8 million actions. It's one of the biggest responses they've ever had at an Align Act campaign. People want it. They know that they need a solution for central bank digital currencies and China's gold wallet and the threats that will bring. And so we built a team ready to help make this happen in Texas and any other state. So if you go to transactionalgold.com, register there. And if you come from another state, we'll try and help make this happen in your state. So I wrote a new book. It's called Pirate Money. It's very easy to read. It's almost out. This is my copy with all the last-minute notes. It's been endorsed by Dr. Ben Carson, also Dr. Naomi Wolf, plus Frank Gaffney and Reggie Littlejohn. It's just a little over 100 pages. It has all the history of why pirate money works, how it works, and so forth. It's very easy to read. And pray for us. We have a special session in Austin, hopefully in September. We need to get as much publicity as possible. I already have a dozen states, including Oklahoma, Utah, and others, Florida, Texas, already showing interest. The 12 states that have contacted me, if you put them together, would be the third largest economy on the planet, third only behind the United States and China. So if we do this, and we're very close, with your help, we can get across the line, it'll make a real difference. This is our solution to the Great Reset and to central bank digital currencies. So we'd love to have your support. Go to transactionalgold.com and register your support there. And here's what I say. This is a phrase. Davy Crockett came from Tennessee and came to Texas. And he said when he left Tennessee, he said, y'all may go to hell. I shall go to Texas. I want to tell you, CBDC may go to hell. My gold shall go to Texas. Or inflation, or the BRICS currencies, or a tax on the dollar. They can all go to hell. Our gold should go to Texas. This is a real solution, and the solution is pirate money. Thank you so much, Frank.
Thank you, Kevin. As always, inspiring as well as exciting. And I hope that we can add to those 2.8 million responses you've achieved so far in the Align Act campaign in support of this effort in Texas, and get that special session and get this gold repository with an ATM attached to it available to people all over this country, and really give the Fed a run for, if I may use the expression, its money. We're going to finish these presentations with Clean Matter, very considerable accomplishment. He's an investigative reporter by trade, but he's an essayist, an author, and a public intellectual and agitator, not least on behalf of the most worthy causes of our time, one of which is clearly trying to protect our freedom, our sovereignty, our constitutional republic, in short, from what these transnationalists mind for us, with the connivance, of course, of the Chinese Communist Party and its social credit source system, and what they're trying to export in the way of the infrastructure for bringing it here. With the help, to be sure, of the World Economic Forum and the European Union and the World Health Organization and many, many others. I want to just say that we've got, I believe, an extraordinary opportunity here, and I'm anxious to hear Leo Hohmann's thoughts on what he describes as the beast system, whether you want it or not, and what we do about it if we don't want it.
Yes, thank you, Frank, for that very nice introduction. I'd like to talk today about the digitization of humanity and this globalist idea that you as a human being will be digitized, quote, whether you like it or not. There's this drive to create and lure us into a digital, what I consider a digital feudal system, that they hope we'll sign up for voluntarily, but eventually there will be, as Nick pointed out in that first presentation, an enforcement component, no doubt about it. Biometric iris scanners, your eye, are being set up right now throughout Southern Europe, particularly in Spain and Portugal, parts of Asia. There's one in Tokyo. There's another in Miami, Florida. It's called the Orb, O-R-B. I wrote about it last week at leohohmann.com, and Business Insider just came out with an article about it today. I will put that in the chat right now. There it is. fresh off of the press just today on an article, a story that I had written about last week. These are the words, you will have it whether you like it or not. These are the words of Alex Blania, the CEO of a company called Tools for Humanity, which has two products right now called WorldCoin and World ID. His partner is a name that I think more of you will recognize, Mr. Sam Altman, who's the founder of OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT. So this is no fly-by-night company. WorldCoin and World ID. Their plans call for scanning the eyeballs of every human being on the planet with a device called the Orb, then connecting your biometric ID to the WorldCoin cryptocurrency. But it could be tied to any digital token in your bank account, a CBDC or otherwise. This is a real thing, folks. If you go on Twitter right now, you'll see people taking pictures of themselves in front of this creepy looking orb device that they put in front of the with selfies or just the device itself in various cities around the world. You'll see it, the device, and then like the skyscraper of Miami, Tokyo, Lisbon, etc. They have already 2 million signups. Their goal is 8 billion, every person on the planet, which reminded me when I read that of the Agenda 2030 anthem of no person will be left behind. These technocrats do not leave out for anybody. They know that their system will only work if it is accepted by everyone, either voluntarily or by force. And so this Orb device scans your iris, which is a unique biometric feature of every human being. WorldCoin and World ID are not assured of success in the marketplace, but according to Sam Altman and Alex Blania, quote, something like it, unquote, will ultimately be required for every human being on the planet. In researching the biometric data as it relates to digital IDs and digital payment systems, I found that the two most popular methods right now seem to be eye scans and palm scans, your forehead and your hand. Amazon has the Amazon One payment, which scans your palm at Whole Foods stores and Panera Bread. You can pay with a simple wave of your hand, no plastic, no paper, no cell phone needed. Several American airports, including right here in Atlanta, where I'm at, are partnering with Delta Airlines on a pilot program where you can waltz through the airport without ever having to pull out your phone, your driver's license, a passport, nothing. It's all done by registering your face scan with the authorities, so they'll recognize you as soon as you enter the airport. Cities of all sizes are right now installing facial recognition scanners and super high-resolution cameras connected to the internet, of course, all paid for with federal dollars, starting with 5G, which was funded in large. And now the ever-present traffic cameras on light poles, signs everywhere. They say it's just to keep us safe. I say it's ultimately to create an enforcement tool for 15-minute cities and future lockdowns. In February 2022, Forbes magazine ran an article that said 21 states already had the infrastructure in place for digital health passports. That was over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I'm sure it's many more than 21 right now. But even back then, right around half of the 21 states were Republican, red states. So this is not a Democrat thing or a Republican thing. Both major parties are fully on board with the digitization. But let's get back to the digital ID and how it relates to your money. You will need some kind of biometric identifier in the near future. Mr. Blania says it will happen, quote, in the next couple of years. I found that interesting because I reported last week on the nation of Ethiopia creating a digital ID, tying it to people's bank accounts and saying that it will be mandatory by when? 2025. Your digitized biometric ID will also be needed, as I think Nick or maybe it was Reggie mentioned. It will be needed for you to log on to the internet, where you will need to prove that you are A, human and not AI, and that B, you are a unique human, Leo Hohmann, Reggie Littlejohn, Frank Gaffney. This will gradually take over healthcare, banking, and all buying and selling if these globalist psychopaths get their way. What we have in play right now is your classic Hegelian dialectic. Starting a couple months ago, almost every tech expert in the world put out a public warning about AI becoming too powerful, too dangerous, and open to abuses. Some were even calling for a moratorium on the development of AI. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Sam Altman, all of them chimed in with fearful warnings about AI taking over the world. To the average listener, it sounded like they care about humanity. They do not. This is a trap. They hoping we will walk into this trap voluntarily. They have given us the warning. Now, when the problem manifests itself, when we start having deep fake videos of Leo Hohmann, Reggie Littlejohn, and Frank Gaffney, the hope is that people will beg them for a solution. The solution will, of course, be worse than the problem. A biometric ID for everyone, as Alex Blania says, whether we like it or not. I've been writing for the last 3 years that this beast system, as I call it, is based on the citizens of the world accepting two major components: a globally recognized digital ID and a globally recognized digital money system. Altman and Blania's company is working on both. They've created a database that links central bank digital currencies with a digital ID system. The company has created its own digital money called WorldCoin. It's a WorldCoin token. And they're giving you a free WorldCoin, by the way, if you'll sign up voluntarily for this system. They always lure you in with benefits. The company has created its own digital money called WorldCoin, and they've linked the WorldCoin tokens to another product called World ID. The World ID is a digital identity system, which I described already with this orb device scanning people's irises. It's already available and being tested on a voluntary basis. It's my opinion that when it's all in place and no longer voluntary, these technologies will be used to create and enforce 15-minute cities and social credit scoring systems. We saw the video already by Christine Anderson linking these two together. I believe she's right on the mark. The goal of these globalists is to have a totalitarian system ruling over an apathetic, fearful people who are trained to follow the path of least resistance. Don't make waves. Don't question authority. Do as you're told. The Chinese system. COVID was a test run for this system, which of course we failed. The new system will be cashless, cardless, phoneless, and genderless. This advancing beast system will use technology to enforce the new rules for whatever new normal the elites throw our way. I'd like to finish up here now with a couple of what I call prophetic quotes from years ago by men who saw all of this coming. The first is by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the late Zbigniew Brzezinski, and his 1970 book, 1970, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Brzezinski said, and I quote, "The technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date complete files containing even the most personal information about every citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities," unquote. And the final quote is from Aldous Huxley, author of the classic book Brave New World, who in 1931, even further back, said, quote, "The perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy. Don't we hear a lot about that lately? They're always talking about our democracy and who's a threat to our democracy. Huxley said the perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where, through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitude, unquote. And that wraps it up, Frank.
Thank you very much, Leo Hohmann, for an excellent presentation. And the mark of the beast, I think, is what we're getting at here. And I love that, if I can use that expression, coinage of the term. Let's do a round or two of questions if we can, in the time available. So much to discuss. Reggie, you've really been raising an alarm about this for quite some time. I mean, the whole idea of a Stop Vax Passports task force was really born of your concerns that once this mechanism was in place, we would see, whether it's under the pretext of health, crises or something else, that it would constitute the platform for the Chinese social credit system. The idea of overlaying this not only with the central bank digital currency, but also with AI, artificial intelligence, or what we're told is now a coming thing, artificial general intelligence, which is the stuff that corrects itself and just vastly outsmarts humans and presumably ultimately dispatches us. These are things that it's, as you said at the outset, perhaps sounding incredible to the layman who isn't steeped in how these various technologies are emerging. But I think what we've done in the course of just this hour is demonstrate with your videos and with these very important insights from our presenters. This is now upon us, and the AI piece of it makes that much more irreversible, I think, as you put it, the kind of digital gulag that we could face in the very near future. Would you like to add to your litany thoughts on the AI piece?
Sure, Frank. Thanks for asking. So this entire digital gulag is absolutely dependent on AI because that's the only way they can amass the kind of data that they need. So that's the way it is in China. The whole thing is, facial recognition, real-time geolocation, knowing where you are, what you look like, and all of your social media posts, your internet search history, your internet spending history, all of this is tracked by AI. And by the way, AI is biased. Okay, the people who are creating the AI, the people who are running the AI, they set the rules, and the rules will reflect whatever their worldview is. So if you have people running AI who are ESG, woke, people who are anti-God or whatever their bias is, it's going to come through in the AI, and they're going to pick up people who disagree with them, and they're going to give them a low social credit score. So this is also a way of identifying dissenters, and it's also a way of enforcing religious persecution. And as many of you know, there was an FBI memo that came out in January of 2023 identifying traditional Latin Mass Catholics as potential domestic threat actors. Okay, so how is that going to be picked up? It's going to be picked up through AI and the kinds of people who are creating the rules to identify people who they want to trap in the digital gulag. It's going to be run by people who are very much with the narrative. It's going to be run by the UN and the WHO and people who agree with them. And anybody who disagrees with them is going to be identified as such and is going to find themselves trapped in the digital gulag.
Nick Corbishley, the thing that I was particularly struck by in your remarks is the surveillance piece of this. And it's obviously a feature, a very prominent feature of your book, Scan. I want to just draw you out on this. In communist China, there are estimated to be hundreds of millions now of these cameras that do facial and gait recognition and other, monitoring of what's ever in the, I guess, the visual spectrum. It's just part, of course, of the comprehensive monitoring scheme that the Chinese Communist Party has implemented for all kinds of other purposes, social networks, not least. We're not there yet, as best I can tell. There are airports here and there and government buildings and the like. But is there some hope? I think you were indicating not only that if you don't do a digital ID, you might screw up the central bank digital currency option, but if you don't do the mass surveillance with these proliferated cameras, notably, that you might screw up the digital ID surveillance state as well.
China is clearly is at the leading edge of these trends, which perhaps is not a great surprise given it is a totalitarian system of governance. So it's easier to implement these sorts of technological systems. You're not going to get the sort of pushback, do you will, in countries with more liberal democratic traditions. And even if you were to get pushback, how would you express that pushback in a country that is not exactly tolerant of opposing viewpoints? But at the same time, I mean, I would say that we are following in China's wake at quite a pace. So, I mean, like, China began its development of a central bank digital currency, the digital yuan, in 2014, and we were behind that. And I would say in some cases we're catching up quite quickly. So, I mean, they are at the pilot stage. But like I said in my original presentation, Australia is at the pilot stage as well. And it's not just China, India. So, I mean, a lot of people talk about China as the kind of example for this. And it's certainly, when it comes to, I would say, surveillance and the use of facial recognition technologies, it is clearly kind of like in a league of its own, or almost a league of its own. London, surprisingly, if you look at the number of cities, the ranking of the cities in the world with the highest number of surveillance cameras, I think London is number 3. And it's really weird to go around London or even any small town or city in my native UK, because there are cameras everywhere. So yeah, I think that the surveillance is a very important aspect of the world that is developing around us, and the normalization of this surveillance system is very important, I think, among the younger people. So, I mean, I write in my book, and Leo talked about this, whether it's facial recognition, whether it's palm recognition, it is normalizing among young people, even children, the idea of using parts of your body as a means of transaction. And this is something that happened certainly in Scotland. I think it was last year, not the year before that. They basically had a pilot program to expedite. This is like the most pathetic excuse for launching the worst kind of Orwellian technologies on 11 to 15, 16-year-olds to expedite the canteen queues at lunchtime. They set up these facial recognition cameras, and until there was an outcry from the parents, this was a system that was in use for a number of months. And it's, unless there is an outcry from sufficient numbers of people, these systems are just going to grow more and more prolific. And I mean, I would like to give one more example. I think that it is really important to give positives, to give little glimmers of hope. So, I mean, like, one for me is, for example, what has happened in recent months in Nigeria, which has got almost zero attention. in the West. And Nigeria is very important because it was the first major economy or largest economy in the world to launch a central bank digital currency. It was a total flop. It got very little traction among the population. So the government and the central bank did what we would expect. It's either you want it, whether you want it or not. The Nigerian people didn't want it. So what they did was they demonetized the economy. They cut out roughly 60% of all cash from the system in a very cash-based economy. And this caused immense economic pain to the people. Businesses went broke. The economy suffered a sharp downturn in economic activity. And despite all of that, eventually after two or 3 months, the Constitutional Court demanded that the government and the central bank pull back. And the interesting thing, the most interesting result of this, at least from my view, is that not only was the central bank governor who led this terrible, devastating economic program, not only was he removed from his seat, he was actually arrested by the new incoming president of Nigeria and the state security forces. So, I mean, it goes to show that despite their intentions, there is a degree of incompetency. These systems are not infallible. There is no guarantee that they may do a lot of harm in the process of their implementation. But I think that we shouldn't fall to fatalism. I think there is still cause for optimism, as long as we can get enough of a word out there.
Thank you. You've introduced several topics that warrant another webinar. We'll probably try to arrange them. One of which is this idea of, as you said, normalizing on the grounds of convenience, arrangements that begin the process of, I guess, what's our friend Joe Allen calls transhumanism, whereby these chips are not just in your palm for scanning purposes, but in your cerebral cortex, and thereby, shaping as well as expressing your thoughts. Frightful stuff, but I think not too far down the road, especially if we're hurtling down these tracks, as I think we've persuasively argued we are. I wanted to ask you about, in that regard, specifically, Leo, hurtling down the tracks. You mentioned, I believe, that 21 states a couple of years ago were deemed to be sort of digital ID ready. Is that through the so-called Real ID program that the Patriot Act requires all states to, conform to? They keep moving the deadline. I think it's now 2025. But is that the vehicle? And will it, in fact, be the case that if you do sign up for the the Real ID as your driver's license with your respective states, that it will become this digital ID platform?
Yeah. Brian Kemp recently, I do think it's a step up from Real ID. The Real ID may be folded into it at some point, but a true digital ID is going to involve more than just a fingerprint, which you can get a Real ID certified driver's license in several states, I know in Georgia, with just submitting your fingerprint. But Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, recently introduced a new what he calls digital driver's license, which involves a facial scan. You have to have your face scanned, and that's what is required to, say, go into the Atlanta airport, card-free, cash-free, ID-free, and you just get right through the system, no questions asked. So this is more than just the Real ID, although I believe that's a step towards it, Frank. And just a point towards what Nick was saying about delving into fatalism. I have a couple of good examples where that holds true. Smart cities. Smart cities will become smart cities before they become 15-minute cities. A 15-minute city is just weaponizing the technology that's in a smart city. And we have a couple of examples already recently. I did a story a couple weeks ago on Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Kootenai County, which is in northern Idaho. And the people there are absolutely organizing and rising up against smart city technology that their elected officials want to install throughout the county. And it looks like it hasn't all played out yet, but there's a big meeting coming down in August, and they feel relatively confident that they're going to win this battle. They've got 350 people, folks, in a county of 150,000 is all it takes. And they are close to beating the smart city the whole federal push. It's all paid for with federal dollars. They're installing these surveillance cameras all over the place. Later on to be see, this is, in my opinion, where we're not caught up with China yet, is in the weaponization of this surveillance technology. But I think we're getting awful close to matching them, and certainly will be within the next year or so, in terms of how much of this surveillance equipment is actually installed in our cities. But back to the example, Kootenai County, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is on the verge of defeating smart city technology, whereas a few hundred miles down the road in Jackson, Wyoming, the city council there recently approved smart city technology to be installed in that small town. And the quotes from the local newspapers that were attached to the council members who voted in favor of this were astonishing. They all said, 2 or 3 of them, that they didn't want the surveillance technology. They were perfectly aware of where it was going and that it was very it could be used in a very nefarious manner. But they said they had to vote for it anyway because the train was too far down the road and we can't stop it. It was a completely fatalistic mindset. And so that town will become a 15-minute city. They're also fighting it in San Diego. That is yet to be, discovered in which way they will go. And I'm not saying every city that organizes and tries to fight this will win, but I think some definitely will. It just depends on who you have elected and how many people you can organize.
Thank you. Thank you for connecting the dots here between the smart city and the 15-minute city. And again, this may sound totally unbelievable, people, that you're going to have a regimen that says you're entitled to walk 15 minutes from your residence, but no more. Until, again, you see what the Chinese Communist Party was doing not so long ago in turning the digital health passports of individuals who wanted to get access to their bank accounts and were being told they couldn't because of the banking crisis in China. And their passports turned from green to red. They weren't allowed to go anywhere outside of their, blocked down apartments. So this is, again, not something that we are fantasizing about or worrying unnecessarily about. This is in practice today in other parts of the world. And I just wanted to tie in something that we've been working hard on, both this task force and our sovereignty coalition, as regular viewers of these programs know, is the very real problem that as you watch the World Health Organization being empowered to use new authorities under one of two gambits, or maybe both, international health regulation amendments or a new treaty. Well, they try not to call it a treaty. It is a treaty, framework agreement, an accord, whatever they may use as a euphemism. But it's a driving force behind a lot of this. notably the digital ID, as we've talked about, but also the money that has already been appropriated. And I thought that's where you were going to go, Leo, in your conversation about Jackson. There are a lot of patriots in Coeur d'Alene. I know that for sure. And I think there's still a few in Jackson. But if the money is a piece of this, I wouldn't be surprised. And the so-called One Health money that is being sloshed around without any apparent real transparency or accountability is another means of lubricating the movement towards a health ID that becomes a digital ID that becomes a CBDC mechanism and all the rest, 15-minute cities in the end. We are very near at the end of our time. And I'm very mindful that we could go on and probably will in further meetings of this sort. I just want to maybe make a closing comment. I spent most of my professional life worrying about the vulnerabilities of our electric grid to various forms of attack. The most efficient of which is something called electromagnetic pulse, whereby at the macro level, a nuclear weapon could be detonated high above the United States and fry every electronic device within line of sight of that burst. Wouldn't necessarily cause any harm that the blasts and so on would cause you to think, but that wouldn't be the problem. The problem would be this electromagnetic pulse. I mention it because listening to this litany of horribles, I confess I'm rethinking my position. Electromagnetic pulse and the end of electricity in this country may be the only thing that saves us from the kind of nightmare that we're talking about. There will be no digits, no ones and zeros running everything, you can bet. There will be an awful lot of hardship that would go along with that, and I'm saying it so dependent upon, yes, electricity, as well as digital information that allows us to do things and denies us the right to do things. And one other thought is, we're talking about that seems so unimaginably at odds with the kind of nation that we have inherited from generations that fought for it, that fought for those freedoms, that made it possible for us to benefit from them as we have. And here we've at the cusp of allowing it all to be taken away from us. And we've had some suggestions made, Kevin Freeman's notably, Reggie's talking about some Align Act and other campaigns. Obviously, in the next few days, I venture to guess that everybody in this audience, both with us at the moment and those who will be in the future, will have an opportunity, if you bestir yourself to take it, to interact with somebody representing you. Maybe at the local level, perhaps at the federal level, maybe even a United States senator. Some of them will be looking for your votes. You can be sure of that, but they'll be in their neighborhoods and perhaps therefore in yours. I entreat you to take aboard this information, to share it as widely as you can, and to engage with those who do have the power still. Yes, the train is far down the tracks, no doubt about it, but still have the power to take on this presidential executive order that has given a mandate to the CBDC, for example, here in the United States, to the bill that Kristen Sinema is proposing to mandate more digitization of IDs and so on, and not least to fight against this idea that we will submit to the World Health Organization, or for that matter, the UN Secretary General in ways that are absolutely at odds with our freedoms, our sovereignty, and our country. The time is short, ladies and gentlemen. This is partly why we wanted to hold this program as urgently as we could. I want to again thank Reggie Littlejohn for all that she's done to help pull together this first-class team, as well as, of course, our various speakers, Nick Corbishley, Kevin Freeman, Leo Homan, as always, Didi Laugesen and Oleg Sebastian, making it all come together. But this is an incredibly important moment, yes, and program. And I want to thank all of you for taking it aboard. And I pray that you'll pray as well that we will get this message through to the people who are in a position to say, we will not go this way. And we'll do it right quick. Thank you very much. Back to you, Didi.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you to our panelists. Your bravery is inspiring. And thank you to, most especially to our audience for being here today. A video post to Stop Vax Passports, that's stopvaxpassports.org, within a day of the end of our program. Please share this program with your colleagues and other networks, your elected officials, and check back for more information on this and other upcoming programs. And while you're there, check out the Take Action tab for things that you can do at once to help stop the worldwide advance party-modeled tyranny being imposed on us during future public health emergencies and other fear-based false benefit platforms and agreements meant to trap us in a digital gulag. Thanks for being here today. Us at thesovereigntycoalition.org to demand that America #exit the WHO. Thanks for being here today, and goodbye.
So we brought it to LFA TV, and we're blowing it wide open. We've only scratched the surface. I've got another video here to show you as well. Roll it.
So this used to be a golf course, right? It was supposed to be a golf course. Look what we just stumbled upon. Those are the buses that are trafficking migrants. They're hiding out here on what looks like an abandoned golf course. Yeah, good. Keep filming them. This is bullshit. Oh yeah, there's security officers, there's border patrol coming out of here. This is wild, y'all. So this looks like what? Like an abandoned building. Look at how hidden this thing is. It says golf course, so we're gonna show you guys exactly. Look at that. Does that look like it's open? No. That says Fort Brown Golf Course, right? Fort Brown effing Golf Course. So you guys see what we're seeing here? And now look, we're about to pass another Border Patrol agent coming in right here. And this is what we're dealing with here, folks. It's Border Patrol out of this random golf course running a fucking human smuggling operation into the United States, folks. That's literally what this looks like. Now watch here. We're gonna pass these guys. What are these guys doing over here? What are they doing, huh? Fucking smuggling drugs, smuggling humans, human trafficking. This shit pisses me off, y'all.
And I apologize for the language, but obviously when you see these children being trafficked like this from these large facilities, and we showed you the drone footage yesterday. If you've not seen the drone footage, follow our short clips page, LFA TV Clips, or follow me on social media, Instagram. I put them out there as well. We're putting out these short